The champagne flute slipped through my fingers. I lunged for it, my hand closing around empty air as the glass tumbled toward the Italian marble floor. Time seemed to slow as I watched it fall. Watched the golden liquid arc through the air like a streak of liquid sunshine. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just any glass. This was a baccarat crystal flute, probably worth more than my rent, and I'd just sent it plummeting toward certain destruction at a party where I was supposed to be invisible, professional, competent. The glass shattered with a sound like wind chimes dying. "Merda," I whispered, dropping to my knees. The hem of my white silk blouse immediately soaked up champagne and tiny shards of crystal. Perfect. Just perfect. Around me, the party continued its orchestrated chaos. Servers in crisp black uniforms glided between clusters of Miami's elite, carrying trays of canapés that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The string quartet near the infinity pool played something classical and expensive sounding. Laughter rippled across the terrace like waves, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversations conducted in multiple languages. I was not supposed to be here on my knees, picking up broken glass like Cinderella after midnight. "Maya!" Jessica's voice cut through the ambient noise. I looked up to see my supervisor bearing down on me, her expression tight with barely contained fury. Jessica Chen ran events for the ultra-wealthy with the precision of a military general and the warmth of a glacier. "What happened?" "I'm so sorry," I said, gathering shards into my palm with shaking hands. "Someone bumped me and... Never mind." She grabbed my elbow, hauling me to my feet with surprising strength for someone who weighed maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. "Antonia will handle it. You need to check on the cabana setup. Mr. Ferraro's guests are arriving in 20 minutes, and the lighting still isn't right." Mr. Ferraro, Dante Ferraro to be precise. The man whose oceanfront estate we were currently decorating like a Mediterranean fever dream. The man who'd hired Jessica's company to throw this elaborate party for reasons no one had bothered to explain to the temporary help. The man I'd been carefully avoiding all evening, despite the magnetic pull I felt every time I caught a glimpse of him across the terrace. Not that I was supposed to notice him. I was here to work, to collect my paycheck, to add another client to my portfolio so I could eventually stop taking these soul-crushing event jobs and focus on my graphic design business. But Dante Ferraro was the kind of man you noticed even when you were trying desperately not to. I'd seen him exactly 3 times since arriving at the estate 6 hours ago. The first time, he'd been standing on the upper balcony, phone pressed to his ear, his posture radiating the kind of casual power that came from never having to explain yourself to anyone. The second time, he'd been greeting guests near the front entrance, his smile warm and his handshake firm, every inch the gracious host. The third time, he'd been watching me from across the pool, his dark eyes tracking my movements as I adjusted orchid arrangements. That third time had made my skin prickle with awareness. "Maya, focus." Jessica snapped her fingers in front of my face. "Cabana, lighting, now." I nodded, already moving toward the row of pristine white cabanas that lined the far end of the pool. My heels clicked against the travertine tiles, each step a small rebellion against the ache building in my arches. I'd been on my feet since 2 p.m., setting up, arranging, rearranging, and then rearranging again because Jessica had changed her mind about the floral centerpieces. Twice. The Miami heat pressed down like a living thing, thick and wet and suffocating. My blouse clung to my back, my carefully straightened hair already beginning to frizz at the temples despite the industrial-strength hairspray I'd employed. I could feel sweat pooling in places sweat had no business pooling, and I sent up a silent prayer that my deodorant was as clinical strength as advertised. The cabana was a study in calculated luxury. White linen curtains billowed in the ocean breeze. Low couches draped in cream silk beckoned invitingly. A table carved from what looked like a single piece of driftwood held bottles of champagne nestled in silver ice buckets, surrounded by clusters of white roses that probably cost more than my car payment. And the lighting was, Predictably, all wrong. The LEDs cast harsh shadows instead of the soft, romantic glow Jessica had specified in her 17-page event brief. I climbed onto one of the couches, wobbling slightly as my heels sank into the cushions, and reached for the control panel hidden behind a gauzy curtain. "Careful there." The voice came from directly behind me, low and amused and entirely too close. I jerked in surprise, my heel catching on the couch cushion. For the second time that evening, I felt gravity assert its dominance. I flailed, my arms windmilling uselessly as I tipped backward. Strong hands caught me around the waist, steadying me with effortless strength. The contact sent electricity racing up my spine, made my breath catch in my throat. I could smell him. Cedar and bergamot and something darker, more complex. Something that made my hindbrain sit up and take notice. "Easy," the voice said, and I knew who it was before I turned around. Dante Ferraro stood less than a foot away, his hands still bracketing my waist. Up close, he was even more devastating than he'd been from across the terrace. Mid-30s, maybe. Tall, easily 6'2". Broad shoulders filling out a white linen shirt that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very specific idea of masculine beauty. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, lips that managed to be both sensual and somehow dangerous. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. Dark, almost black, framed by thick lashes that would have been wasted on anyone less aggressively male. Eyes that seemed to see straight through the professional mask I'd been wearing all night, down to the messy, complicated truth underneath. "Mr. Ferraro," I managed, my voice coming out breathier than I'd intended. "I'm sorry, I was just fixing the lighting." "Dante," he corrected, his hands still warm against my waist. "And you're Maya, yes? Jessica's star designer." Star designer. I nearly laughed. Jessica had introduced me as temporary help, exactly once before relegating me to setup duty. But I nodded anyway, trying to ignore the way my skin burned where his fingers rested. "The lighting," I said again, desperate to establish some semblance of professionalism. "It's too harsh. I was adjusting. It's perfect." His thumbs moved slightly, a gesture so small I might have imagined it. Except I could feel the ghost of that movement singing through my nerve endings, making it hard to think about appropriate workplace boundaries. "Leave it." But Jessica said, "I'm paying Jessica." His smile was slow, predatory. "And I'm telling you it's perfect. Just like this." His gaze dropped, traveling slowly down my body in a way that should have offended me, but instead made heat pool low in my belly. "You've done excellent work tonight." I should have stepped back. Should have thanked him politely and returned to my duties. Should have remembered that I was here to work, not to get swept up in the gravitational pull of a man who was so far out of my league we weren't even playing the same sport. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, my heart racing, his hands still on my waist. "Thank you," I whispered, and hated how small my voice sounded. He released me abruptly, stepping back to create a respectable distance between us. The loss of contact felt like a physical thing, like someone had peeled away a layer of my skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold, despite the humid evening air. "Your guests," I said, grasping for anything that might restore the natural order of things. "They're arriving soon. I should—" "Yes." His expression shuddered, the warm interest replaced by something cooler, more distant. "You should check with Jessica. Make sure everything is ready." It was a dismissal, polite but firm. I nodded, my cheeks burning as I climbed down from the couch with as much dignity as I could muster. I could feel his eyes on me as I walked away, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical touch. It made my skin prickle and my steps unsteady. Jessica was waiting near the pool, her expression thunderous. What took so long? The lighting, I lied. It needed... Never mind. The VIP guests are arriving. You're on coat check duty. Coat check. In Miami. In August. I bit back a laugh and nodded, following Jessica through the house to the marble-floored foyer where a small closet had been repurposed for the evening. It was air-conditioned, at least, a small mercy that I accepted gratefully as I stationed myself beside the gleaming mahogany door. The guests arrived in waves of expensive perfume and even more expensive jewelry. I smiled, accepted wraps and clutches and the occasional blazer, hung everything with meticulous care, listened to conversations that floated past like exotic birds, business deals conducted in casual tones, gossip delivered with surgical precision, references to people and places that existed in a world so far removed from my own, they might as well have been discussing Mars. I was reaching for a beaded evening bag when I heard his name. Dante's pulling out all the stops tonight. The woman's voice was low, conspiratorial. I couldn't see her from my position behind the closet door, but I could hear her perfectly. This must be about the territory dispute. Or the shipment. A man this time, his accent vaguely European. Giovanni's been making noise about the port access. Territory dispute, shipment, port access. Something cold settled in my stomach. These weren't normal party topics, weren't normal business conversations. They sounded like something out of a movie, the kind of dialogue that preceded violence and betrayal and bodies washing up on beaches. Maya. Jessica's voice made me jump. Stop eavesdropping and help with the service. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I closed the closet door. I was being paranoid. These were probably just wealthy people discussing their wealthy people problems. Real estate, maybe. Import-export business. Perfectly legal. Perfectly normal explanations for words that had sounded distinctly illegal. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to hear. The party shifted into high gear around 9 p.m. The string quartet gave way to a DJ who played the kind of ambient electronica that rich people apparently considered dancing music. The champagne flowed more freely. Laughter grew louder, boundaries more fluid. I circulated with a tray of canapés, offering smoked salmon on blinis and foie gras on brioche, to people who barely acknowledged my existence. I was invisible again, safe in my invisibility, until I walked past the pool and saw Dante standing at the edge, his hand on the small of a woman's back. She was beautiful in that specific way that money could buy. Perfect skin, perfect hair, perfect body poured into a red dress that probably cost more than my car. She laughed at something he said, her hand resting possessively on his chest. Something ugly twisted in my gut. Jealousy, maybe. Or just the bitter recognition that I'd been stupid to think his attention meant anything. He was Dante Ferraro, owner of this obscene palace, host of parties that cost more than I made in a year. And I was temporary help. I turned away, my vision blurring slightly. And that's when it happened. My heel caught on the edge of a travertine tile. I stumbled, overcorrected, felt my balance shift catastrophically. The satin robe I'd thrown over my blouse earlier, Jessica had insisted on it, said it made the servers look more cohesive, slipped from my shoulders. I grabbed for it reflexively, which meant I couldn't catch myself when I fell. The pool water was shockingly cold after the humid evening air. It closed over my head, muffling the music and laughter, and turning the world into a silent, chlorinated cocoon. I thrashed, disoriented, my waterlogged clothes dragging me down. My lungs burned. Panic clawed at my throat. Then strong hands gripped my arms, hauling me upward, breaking the surface. I gasped, coughing up pool water, my hair plastered to my face. Someone had me, was pulling me toward the shallow end. I blinked water from my eyes and found Dante Ferraro staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. He'd jumped in fully clothed. His white shirt clung to his chest, revealing the hard planes of muscle underneath. Water streamed down his face, dripped from his hair. He looked like something out of a cologne commercial. And he'd frozen. His hands were still on my arms, but his grip had gone slack. His eyes were fixed on something behind me, his expression shifting from concern to shock to something harder, more dangerous. "What?" I started, but he cut me off. "Turn around." His voice was rough, urgent. "Turn around right now." I did, confused and shaking, and still trying to process the fact that I'd just fallen into a pool at the most important event I'd ever worked. Felt the cool air hit my exposed back. Realized with dawning horror that my white blouse had gone completely transparent in the water. But Dante wasn't looking at my bra. He was staring at something else. The tattoo. I'd gotten it when I was 18, drunk on cheap tequila and bad decisions during spring break. A symbol I'd seen in a dream, or thought I had. Delicate black lines that formed something almost floral, almost geometric. Beautiful and strange and utterly meaningless. Except Dante Ferraro was staring at it like he'd seen a ghost. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the party noise like a knife. "Who gave you that mark?" My teeth were chattering, from cold or fear or both. "I don't know what you... Who are you?" He grabbed my shoulders, turned me to face him. His eyes burned into mine, dark and intense, and absolutely terrifying. "Who the fuck are you, really?" Before I could answer, before I could even begin to formulate a response, strong hands grabbed me from behind. Someone wrapped a towel around my shoulders. Jessica's voice sharp with annoyance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ferraro. She's new. She didn't mean..." "Get everyone out." Dante's voice was ice cold, utterly commanding. "Clear the property, now." Jessica made a small, shocked sound. "Sir, the party is over." He didn't look away from me. "Everyone leaves. Everyone except her." The last guest left at 10:47 p.m. I knew because I'd been watching the ornate clock above the fireplace in Dante's study for the past 37 minutes, counting down each second like a prisoner awaiting execution. The towel someone had draped around my shoulders had long since stopped providing any real warmth. My wet clothes clung to my skin, making me shiver despite the air conditioning that hummed quietly through the mansion's vast network of vents. Jessica had tried to take me with her when she left, had actually grabbed my arm and attempted to pull me toward the door, whispering urgently about lawsuits and liability and how we needed to leave immediately. But Dante's security, because of course he had security, massive men in black suits who'd materialized like shadows when he'd cleared the party, had blocked her path with professional politeness and immovable presence. "Ms. Reed stays," one of them had said, his voice carrying the trace of an accent I couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe. "Mr. Ferraro's orders." Jessica had looked at me with something between pity and fury before she'd left, promising to call the police if I didn't text her within the hour. I'd nodded, though we both knew she wouldn't. Jessica Chen didn't call the police on clients who could afford to throw parties that cost 6 figures. She valued her business too much for that kind of professional suicide. Now I sat alone in a study that probably cost more than my parents' house, wearing borrowed clothes that made me feel like a child playing dress-up. Someone, a housekeeper I assumed, though I hadn't seen her, had left a stack of dry garments outside the bathroom door while I'd showered in a marble sanctuary that featured heated floors and a rainfall showerhead the size of a dinner plate. The clothes were expensive. Silk pajama pants in deep emerald green, a matching camisole that fit perfectly despite the fact that no one should have known my size. The fact that they fit perfectly was its own kind of terror. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the ocean. The party debris had already been cleared with supernatural efficiency. The pool sparkled innocently under strategically placed lights. White cabanas swayed gently in the breeze. It looked peaceful, normal, like nothing dramatic had happened here less than an hour ago. Like I hadn't fallen into that pool and emerged to find my entire reality shifting beneath me. The tattoo on my back pulsed with phantom sensation, as if Dante's stare had burned itself into my skin. I'd looked at it 1,000 times over the years, traced its elegant lines in bathroom mirrors, explained it away as a drunken mistake to the few people who'd seen it. My adoptive parents had been horrified when I'd come home from spring break with permanent ink marking my skin. They'd insisted I have it removed, offered to pay for the laser treatments. But I'd refused. Something about the symbol had felt right, felt important in a way I couldn't articulate. Like it meant something I was supposed to remember, but couldn't quite grasp. The study door opened without a knock. Dante entered with the fluid grace of a predator, changed into dry clothes that somehow looked even more expensive than the ruined linen he'd been wearing. Dark slacks, a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with what looked like scars. His hair was still damp, swept back from his face in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his features. He wasn't alone. The man who followed him was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that held the kind of cold intelligence that came from surviving in a world that didn't forgive mistakes. He wore a 3-piece suit despite the hour, despite the heat, and carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who'd spent time in the military. "Sit down, Maya." Dante's voice was different now. Not warm and amused like it had been by the cabana. Not shocked and urgent like it had been in the pool. This was the voice of a man who gave orders and expected them to be followed without question. I sat, my hands twisting in my lap. The older man pulled a tablet from his briefcase and began swiping through screens with practiced efficiency. Dante remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "This is Alessandro Romano," Dante said, nodding toward the older man. "He's been with my family for 30 years. He handles sensitive matters." Sensitive matters. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. "I'm going to ask you some questions," Dante continued, his voice carefully neutral. "And you're going to answer them truthfully. Understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Where were you born?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected accusations, demands to know who I really was, why I'd come to his party, not this clinical interrogation. "I don't know," I admitted. "I was adopted when I was 6 months old. The agency in Orlando never told my parents where I came from originally." Alessandro made a note on his tablet. Dante's expression didn't change. "Your adoptive parents. Names? David and Sarah Reed. They live in Tallahassee." My hands were shaking now. I pressed them flat against my thighs, trying to appear calmer than I felt. "They're good people, retired teachers. They don't have anything to do with whatever this is." "And the tattoo?" Dante moved closer, his shadow falling across me. "When did you get it?" "Spring break 2018. I was 18, stupid, drunk." The words tumbled out too fast. "I saw the design in a dream, or I thought I did. It felt important. I know that sounds insane, but show me." It wasn't a request. I stood on trembling legs and turned around, lifting the silk camisole to expose my back. I heard Dante's sharp intake of breath, heard Alessandro murmur something in Italian that sounded like a prayer or a curse. "Cristo Santo," Alessandro whispered. "It's exact, down to the last detail." "I can see that." Dante's voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested barely restrained emotion. "Take a picture. We need to send it to Vitale." The click of the camera made me flinch. I lowered my shirt and turned back around, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Please," I said, and hated how my voice broke on the word. "Please just tell me what this is about. Why does my tattoo matter? Who do you think I am?" Dante and Alessandro exchanged a look that spoke of decades of shared history, of conversations conducted in glances rather than words. Finally, Dante sighed and ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the perfect styling. 23 years ago, he said slowly, there was a war between the major families in South Florida. Territory disputes, business disagreements, the usual bullshit that men kill each other over. He paused, his jaw tightening. One of those families was the Santoros. Old blood, Sicilian roots, connections that went back generations. They controlled the port traffic, ran most of the import operations from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. I wanted to interrupt, to tell him I didn't care about mob history, that I just wanted to go home and forget this night had ever happened. But something in his expression kept me silent. The Santoro family had a daughter, Dante continued. Gabriella. She was maybe 13 when the war started. Beautiful kid, smart, loved art and music. She was supposed to be untouchable. There are rules, even in our world. You don't hurt children. You don't target families. What happened to her? I asked, though some part of me already knew. She disappeared. Alessandro spoke for the first time, his accented English careful and precise. During a raid on the Santoro compound, there was a fire, confusion, gunshots. When the smoke cleared, Gabriella was gone. Her parents assumed she'd died in the fire, that her body had been incinerated. They found remains, children's bones. DNA testing wasn't what it is now. They buried an empty casket and tried to move on. But she didn't die, I whispered, understanding dawning with cold, terrible clarity. The Santoro family mark, Dante said, moving to Alessandro's tablet and turning it to face me. The screen showed an image of a crest, ornate and beautiful, featuring the exact design that marked my back. Every blood member of the family receives this mark on their 18th birthday. It's tradition, going back centuries. A way to identify true Santoros versus associates, marriages, adopted members. I stared at the crest, at the symbol I'd thought came from a drunken dream. The lines matched perfectly. The curves, the geometric precision, even the small flourish at the bottom that I'd always thought looked like a signature. You think I'm Gabriella Santoro? I said flatly. I think, Dante replied, his voice gentle now, almost kind, that you might be the daughter of Antonio and Maria Santoro. I think someone saved you from that fire 23 years ago and put you into the adoption system under a false identity. I think you've been hidden your entire life and you didn't even know it. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair, focusing on breathing, on not passing out or throwing up, or doing any of the other things my body desperately wanted to do in response to this impossible information. That's insane, I managed. I'm a graphic designer from Tallahassee. My parents are teachers. I don't know anything about the Mafia or family wars or... Your birthday, Alessandro interrupted. When is it? March 15th. He nodded, making another note. Gabriella Santoro was born March 15th, 2001. You would be 24 now, yes? 24. The same age Gabriella would be if she'd survived. This is a mistake, I said, standing abruptly. A coincidence. People share birthdays. The tattoo, I probably saw that crest somewhere, in a book or online, and my subconscious remembered it. This doesn't prove anything. There's a simple way to know for certain. Dante pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. DNA test. We have samples from the Santoro family vault. If you're Gabriella, it'll show up immediately. If you're not, you walk out of here and forget this conversation ever happened. And if I refuse? His smile was sad, almost apologetic. Then you walk out anyway. I'm not in the business of holding innocent women against their will. He paused. But Maya, if there's even a chance you're who I think you are, you're in danger. Serious danger. The kind that doesn't care about your graphic design business or your quiet life in Tallahassee. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. If the Santoros thought their daughter was dead for 23 years, why would it matter now? Alessandro and Dante exchanged another loaded glance. Finally, Alessandro spoke, his voice heavy with something that might have been regret. Because Antonio Santoro died 6 months ago, he said. And his will specified that his entire estate, properties worth hundreds of millions, business interests, territory rights, everything, goes to his daughter Gabriella, if she can be found and verified. If she cannot be found within 1 year of his death, the estate transfers to his nephew, Marco Santoro. Understanding crashed through me like a wave. And Marco doesn't want to share. Marco, Dante said quietly, has spent the last 6 months consolidating power, making alliances, positioning himself to take over permanently. If you really are Gabriella, you represent a direct threat to everything he's built. He won't just fight you in court. He'll eliminate the threat entirely. I sank back into the chair, my mind reeling. This morning I'd woken up worried about a freelance deadline and whether I could afford to fix the air conditioning in my apartment. Now I was sitting in a mansion being told I might be the long-lost heir to a criminal empire, with a target on my back I didn't even know I was carrying. I need to think, I said numbly. I need time to... Time is exactly what we don't have. Dante moved to the window, his posture tense. Marco has people everywhere. If he finds out you're alive, if he even suspects, he'll move quickly. We need to secure you, verify your identity, and figure out our next steps before word gets out. Our next steps? I repeated. Why do you care? If I'm Gabriella Santoro, I'm your enemy's daughter. Shouldn't you be happy Marco wants to kill me? Dante turned to face me, and for the first time since the pool, I saw something genuine break through his careful control. Anger, yes, but also something that looked like guilt. Your father and I had an arrangement, he said quietly. Before he died, before he knew about the cancer that would take him, we'd negotiated a peace. Territory divisions, profit sharing, an end to the violence that had poisoned South Florida for decades. He wanted better for the next generation. He told me, Dante's voice caught. He told me that if his daughter had lived, he would have wanted her to have a normal life. Away from this world. Safe. You knew him, I whispered. You were friends? We were something like it, yes. Dante's smile was bitter. Which is why I owe it to Antonio to protect his daughter. To give her the choice he never got to give. Stay hidden and live your quiet life, or claim your birthright and change everything. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went pale. Dante, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Someone just sent Marco Santoro a photo. Alessandro turned the phone to show us. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of me at the party, taken from behind, the tattoo clearly visible through my wet, transparent blouse. It was posted to an encrypted forum 30 minutes ago. He knows. The room went silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Dante's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. The gracious host completely vanished. Lock down the estate, he ordered. Full security protocol. No one in or out without my personal authorization. And get Vitale on the phone. We're going to need the Rossi family's support if this turns into open warfare. Alessandro nodded and left, already barking orders into his phone in rapid Italian. I stood on shaking legs, my mind refusing to process the speed at which my life was disintegrating. I should go. I should leave Miami, leave Florida, disappear. You'd be dead in 48 hours. Dante crossed to me in 3 long strides, his hands gripping my shoulders. Maya, listen to me. You stay here, under my protection, or you die. Those are your only options right now. You can't just keep me prisoner. I'm not. His grip gentled, his thumbs tracing small circles against my collarbone in a gesture that should have been comforting, but instead sent electricity racing through my nervous system. I'm offering you sanctuary, a chance to figure out who you really are and what you want to do about it. But you have to trust me. I looked up into those dark eyes, searching for deception, for ulterior motives, for any sign that this was just another manipulation. But all I saw was grim determination and something that might have been genuine concern. Why should I trust you? I asked. I don't even know you. No, he agreed. You don't. But I knew your father, and I made him a promise. Before I could respond, the lights went out. The mansion plunged into darkness so complete it felt solid, oppressive. I heard Dante curse in Italian, felt his hands tighten on my shoulders. Then the emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in dim red light that made the study look like a crime scene. Stay close to me, Dante ordered, pulling me against his side. His body was warm, solid, radiating the kind of controlled strength that came from years of training. Don't make a sound. We moved through the darkened mansion like ghosts. I could hear shouts in the distance, the crack of what might have been gunfire. My heart hammered against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. This was Miami, not some war zone. People didn't storm mansions and cut power and... Glass shattered somewhere below us. More shouts, closer now. Dante pulled me into what looked like a bedroom, shutting the door silently behind us. He moved to a painting on the wall. A Monet, I thought numbly. An actual fucking Monet. And swung it aside to reveal a biometric scanner. He pressed his palm against it. The scanner beeped softly, and a section of the wall slid open to reveal a hidden room. Inside, he whispered. Now. I stumbled into the darkness. Dante followed and the wall slid shut behind us, sealing us in what appeared to be a panic room. Emergency lighting flickered on automatically, revealing a space about the size of my apartment bedroom. Monitors lined one wall, showing security feeds from around the estate. A small arsenal of weapons occupied another wall. There was a bed, a bathroom, supplies that suggested someone could hide here for days if necessary. On the monitors, I watched masked figures move through the mansion with military precision. 6 of them, maybe more. They moved like professionals, like people who killed for a living. They're here for you, Dante said quietly, standing close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. Marco sent them. He's not wasting any time. How did they find me so fast? My voice was barely a whisper. Someone at the party must have recognized the tattoo, sent that photo to Marco with your location. Dante's jaw tightened as he watched the monitors. I should have been more careful. Should have gotten you out of Miami the second I saw that mark. This is insane. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the shaking that had nothing to do with cold. 24 hours ago, my biggest problem was a difficult client. Now there are assassins in your house trying to kill me because of a tattoo I got while drunk in Cancun. Not just any tattoo. Dante turned to face me, his expression grave. That mark means you're the rightful heir to one of the most powerful criminal organizations in North America. It means you control territory, businesses, connections worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It means you have the power to reshape the entire South Florida underworld if you choose to claim it. I don't want it, I said desperately. I don't want any of it. Can't we just, I don't know, release a statement saying I renounce all claims? That I'm not interested? It doesn't work that way. His voice was gentle but firm. The second that photo went public, you became a threat to Marco's power. Whether you claim your inheritance or not doesn't matter anymore. He can't afford to let you live. On the monitors, one of the masked figures reached the bedroom we'd just left. He was methodical, checking the closet, under the bed, sweeping the room with professional thoroughness. My heart stopped when he approached the Monet, his gloved hand reaching for the frame. But he didn't find the hidden switch. After a moment, he moved on, disappearing from the camera's view. "How long do we stay here?" I asked. "Until Alessandro gives the all clear." Dante pulled out his phone, frowning at the screen. "He's coordinating with our people. They'll sweep the estate, neutralize the threat." Neutralize. Such a clinical word for what I suspected would be messy, violent, and permanent. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs finally giving out. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a fear so deep it felt like drowning. "What happens after?" I asked. "After they neutralize these people? What then?" Dante sat beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. In the confined space of the panic room, I was acutely aware of him. The heat of his body, the scent of his cologne mixed with something earthier, more masculine. The way his presence seemed to fill the small space until there was no room for anything else. "Then we figure out who you really are," he said quietly. "We run the DNA test. We find out if you're Gabriella Santoro or just an incredibly unlucky graphic designer with terrible taste in spring break tattoos." Despite everything, I almost laughed. "And if I am? Gabriella, I mean. Then you have choices to make." He turned to face me, and in the dim emergency lighting, his features looked carved from shadow and stone. "You can stay hidden. I'll help you disappear completely. New identity. New life. Somewhere Marco will never find you. Or you can fight." His hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my trembling ones. "You can claim what's yours. Your father's empire, your birthright. The power to change things, to build something better than what came before. I'll help you with that too. Whatever you choose, I'm with you." The sincerity in his voice did something strange to my chest, made it hard to breathe for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you help me? We just met. You don't owe me anything." "I owed your father," he said simply. "But even if I hadn't, even if I'd never known Antonio Santoro." His free hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I'd still want to protect you. From the moment I saw you across that terrace, before I knew who you were or what you represented, I wanted—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I could see it in his eyes, in the way his gaze dropped to my lips and held there. The same magnetic pull I'd felt by the cabana, amplified by proximity and adrenaline, and the strange intimacy of hiding together in the dark while armed men hunted me through his house. I should have pulled away, should have maintained professional distance, remembered that he was dangerous, that I was in over my head, that getting involved with Dante Ferraro would complicate an already impossible situation. Instead, I leaned in. His lips met mine with a gentleness that contradicted everything I'd seen tonight. The controlled violence on the security monitors, the cold authority in his voice when he'd given orders, the dangerous grace with which he'd moved through the darkened mansion. All of it melted away in the soft pressure of his mouth against mine, in the way his hand cradled my face like I was something precious, breakable. I shouldn't have wanted this. Shouldn't have felt relief and heat and hunger coursing through me as his other hand slid into my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss. But I did. God help me, I did. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "That was inappropriate. You're in danger. You're scared, and don't apologize." My voice was steadier than I expected. "I kissed you back." A smile tugged at his lips, transforming his face from dangerously beautiful to something softer, more human. "So you did." His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled away to check the screen, and I watched his expression shift from tender to grim in the space of a heartbeat. Alessandro? I guessed. The estate is clear. They got 4 of the 6. He stood, offering me his hand. The other 2 escaped, which means Marco knows his first attempt failed. He'll try again, probably within hours. I let him pull me to my feet, my mind still reeling from the kiss, from everything that had happened in the last 2 hours. What do we do? We move you somewhere safer. Dante pressed his palm to the biometric scanner, and the wall slid open. The bedroom beyond looked untouched, no sign of the violence that had swept through the mansion. I have a property in the Keys. Private island, limited access, security that makes this place look like a playground. We'll go there while Alessandro coordinates with the other families, figures out our next move. Other families, I repeated numbly. You mean more Mafia people. I mean the organizations who want Marco contained before he starts a war none of us can afford. Dante moved to the closet and began pulling out clothes with practiced efficiency. Marco's getting ambitious, making moves that threaten the balance of power. If you really are Gabriella, you represent a legitimate challenge to his authority. The other families will support you because it serves their interests to keep Marco in check. He handed me a stack of clothing, jeans, a soft sweater, comfortable shoes, all in my size, which should have disturbed me more than it did. How did you... I started, but he cut me off with a wry smile. I noticed your size when you were setting up the party. Call it a habit of observation. He turned away, giving me privacy to change. We leave in 10 minutes. Pack light. We can get anything you need once we're secure. I changed quickly, my hands still trembling as I pulled on jeans that fit like they'd been tailored for me. The sweater was cashmere, impossibly soft against my skin. The shoes were Italian leather, broken in just enough to be comfortable immediately. Dante Ferraro's habit of observation was detailed enough to be unsettling. When I emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed, I found him changed as well. Dark jeans, a black shirt, a leather jacket that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He looked less like a billionaire businessman and more like someone who could handle himself in a fight, which I was beginning to realize he probably could. Ready? He asked, offering me a matching leather jacket. I need to call my parents, I said, accepting the jacket. They'll worry if they don't hear from me. We'll call them from the car. Secure line. He ushered me toward the door, his hand at the small of my back. But Maya, you can't tell them what's happening. Not yet. The fewer people who know your location, the safer you are. I nodded, though guilt twisted in my gut. My parents had always been overprotective, hovering anxiously through my childhood, terrified something would happen to their adopted daughter. Now I understood why. Some part of them must have known my origins were dangerous, even if they'd never admitted it out loud. The mansion was eerily quiet as we moved through it. I glimpsed Alessandro in the foyer, speaking quietly with several men in tactical gear. He saw us and nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and something that might have been approval. Outside, a black SUV waited, engine running. The driver was one of Dante's security team, a massive man who looked like he bench-pressed motorcycles for fun. He nodded respectfully as Dante opened the back door for me. Straight to the Keys, Dante ordered. Take Route 1, not the highway, and Luca. No one follows us, Luca finished, his voice a gravelly rumble. I know the drill, boss. I slid into the back seat, and Dante climbed in beside me. The door closed with a heavy, final-sounding thunk. Through the tinted windows, I watched the mansion recede into the distance, its elegant facade giving no hint of the violence that had unfolded inside just minutes ago. Here. Dante handed me a phone. It's secure, encrypted. You can call your parents, but keep it brief. If they ask too many questions, tell them you got a last-minute design job that requires you to be off-grid for a few days. I took the phone with numb fingers and dialed the familiar number. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the manufactured cheer she always used to mask her chronic anxiety. "Maya, sweetheart, we were just talking about you. Your father wants to know if you're still coming for Thanksgiving." "Hi, Mom." I forced warmth into my voice, tried to sound normal despite the fact that armed men had just tried to kill me. "Listen, I can't talk long. I got hired for a really intensive project, and I'm going to be out of touch for a few days, maybe a week. But I'm fine. Everything's fine." A pause. Then carefully. "What kind of project?" "Rebranding for a private client. Very hush-hush NDA stuff." The lie came easier than I expected. "I just didn't want you to worry if you couldn't reach me." "Oh." Relief flooded her voice. "Well, that's wonderful, honey. You're so talented. I knew someone would recognize." "I love you, Mom." The words caught in my throat, suddenly too true, too raw. "Tell Dad I love him too. I'll call as soon as I can, okay?" "Of course, sweetheart. Be safe." I ended the call and handed the phone back to Dante, blinking against the burn of tears I refused to shed. They're going to hate me when they find out I lied. They're going to be grateful you're alive. Dante's hand found mine in the darkness of the back seat, his fingers warm and solid. Which is what matters. The drive to the Keys took 3 hours. We traveled in silence mostly, the rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt and Luca's occasional check-ins on his radio, the only sounds. I watched Miami's glittering skyline fade behind us, watched the urban sprawl give way to palm trees and small towns, and eventually the dark expanse of ocean on either side of the overseas highway. Dante made phone calls in Italian, his voice low and urgent. I caught fragments, names I didn't recognize, references to territory and alliances and blood debts. The language of a world I'd never known existed until tonight, a world I might actually belong to. Somewhere around Key Largo, exhaustion finally claimed me. I didn't mean to fall asleep, didn't mean to let my guard down. But the adrenaline crash was inevitable, and Dante's presence beside me felt absurdly safe despite the circumstances. I felt myself drifting, felt his arm come around my shoulders, pulling me against his chest. "Sleep," he murmured against my hair. "I've got you." And despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the terrifying possibility that I wasn't who I'd always thought I was, I believed him. I woke to the sound of waves and the smell of salt air. We were parked on what looked like a private dock, a sleek yacht moored beside us, its lights casting dancing reflections on the dark water. "We're here," Dante said softly, and I realized I was still pressed against his chest, his arm still wrapped protectively around me. "My island is a few miles offshore. The yacht will take us the rest of the way." I sat up, disoriented and stiff from sleeping in the car. "You own an island." "Several, actually." He climbed out and offered me his hand. "But this one is special. Completely off the grid, self-sufficient. Solar power, desalination plant, private security that makes the Secret Service look like mall cops. If Marco wants to find you there, he'll need a small army." The yacht was as luxurious as I expected from a man who owned private islands. All gleaming wood and brass fixtures, with a main cabin that looked like something out of a design magazine. A crew member, young, professional, armed, welcomed us aboard and immediately cast off the mooring lines. Dante led me to the upper deck, where comfortable seating overlooked the bow. As we pulled away from the dock and accelerated into the open water, he poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle I suspected cost more than my monthly rent. "I don't drink much," I said automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of worrying about alcohol consumption while fleeing from Mafia assassins. "Neither do I, usually." Dante handed me a glass anyway, but tonight calls for exceptions. I took a sip, and the wine exploded across my tongue. Complex, layered, perfect. Of course it was perfect. Everything in Dante's world was perfect, carefully curated, controlled. "Tell me about him," I said abruptly. "My father, Antonio Santoro. What was he like?" Dante settled into the seat beside me, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. Complicated, ruthless when he needed to be, but not cruel for cruelty's sake. He believed in honor, in keeping your word even when it cost you, especially when it cost you. He paused, swirling his wine. He talked about Gabriella sometimes, late at night, when the wine made him philosophical. He said losing her broke something in him that never healed. That if she'd lived, he would have found a way out of the life, given her something better. "But she didn't live," I whispered. "I didn't live. The girl he knew died in that fire." "Maybe." Dante turned to look at me, his expression unreadable in the yacht's soft lighting. "Or maybe she survived, grew up safe and loved, became a talented graphic designer with a good heart and terrible luck with spring break tattoos. Maybe Antonio got his wish after all, just not in the way he expected." "You think he'd be happy about this? That I didn't grow up in his world?" "I think," Dante said carefully, "he'd be devastated that you were in danger. But yes, I think a part of him would be relieved that you were spared the worst of it, that you had a chance at normal." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Normal? Right. Nothing says normal like hiding on a private island while your cousin sends hit squads after you." "Fair point." His smile was wry. "For what it's worth, you're handling this remarkably well. Most people would have fallen apart by now. The night's still young." I took another sip of wine, letting the alcohol warm me from the inside. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you kiss me? Earlier, in the panic room?" I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Was it real, or were you just trying to distract me from freaking out?" Dante set down his wine glass and shifted to face me fully. In the moonlight, he looked like something out of a dream, beautiful and dangerous, and utterly focused on me. "It was real," he said quietly. "Ill-advised, inappropriate, probably a dozen other things that make it a terrible idea, but real." His hand came up to cut my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone in that devastating way he had. "I wanted to kiss you from the moment I saw you adjusting those orchid arrangements, before I knew anything about Santoro marks or hidden heirs. I wanted you, Maya. I still want you. That hasn't changed." My breath caught. This is crazy. We barely know each other. And even if I am Gabriella, even if I have some claim to this inheritance, I'm still just... I'm nobody special. "You're wrong." His voice was fierce, almost angry. "You're brilliant. I saw your design portfolio while Alessandra was running background checks. The work you do, the way you see the world, the creativity you bring to everything you touch. That's rare, Maya. That's special. The Santoro name doesn't make you valuable. You're valuable because of who you are." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But doubt gnawed at me, whispering that this was all too much, too fast, that Dante's interest in me couldn't be separated from what I represented to his world. "What if the DNA test is negative?" I asked. "What if I'm not Gabriella, just some random woman with a coincidental tattoo and an inconvenient birthday?" "Then you go back to your life." His hand dropped from my face, and I immediately missed the contact. "And I help you disappear well enough that Marco never finds you. But Maya..." He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "I'd like to see you again. After all this is settled, when you're safe and you have time to think clearly. I'd like to take you to dinner, maybe show you some of my world that doesn't involve panic rooms and assassins." "A date," I said, testing the word. "You're asking me on a date." I'm saying I'd like the chance to get to know you properly, without the threat of imminent death hanging over us. His smile was soft, almost shy. Is that completely insane? Completely, I agreed. But I think I'd like that too. Before either of us could say anything else, the yacht began to slow. I looked up and saw it, Dante's Island, rising from the dark water like something out of a fantasy. White sand beaches glowed in the moonlight. Palm trees swayed in the breeze. And perched on the highest point, a sprawling villa that managed to be both modern and classic, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the stars. "Welcome to Isola della Luna," Dante said, standing and offering me his hand. "Island of the Moon. You'll be safe here, Maya. I promise." As the yacht docked and Dante led me down the gangplank toward the villa, I couldn't shake the feeling that my old life, my small apartment, my freelance clients, my careful routine, was slipping away like sand through my fingers. Whether I was Gabriella Santoro or just Maya Reed, incredibly unlucky graphic designer, nothing would ever be the same again. And looking at Dante's hand wrapped around mine, feeling the solid warmth of his presence beside me, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted it to be. The villa was a masterpiece of architectural design and paranoid security masquerading as luxury. Dante gave me a brief tour as we entered through massive glass doors that, he explained casually, were bulletproof and could withstand direct explosive charges. The foyer opened into a great room with soaring ceilings and views of the ocean on 3 sides, decorated in shades of white and cream that should have felt sterile, but instead felt like being wrapped in clouds. "There are 6 bedrooms," Dante said, leading me up a curved staircase that seemed to float without visible support. "You can take your pick. Each has its own bathroom, ocean views, and—" He paused, his expression slightly embarrassed. "Independent panic room access, in case of emergency." "Of course they do," I muttered. "Because that's totally normal." His laugh was genuine, warm. "Welcome to my world." He showed me to the master suite, which was larger than my entire apartment, and decorated with the same careful attention to detail I'd seen throughout the estate. A massive bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that probably had a thread count higher than my credit score. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the moonlit ocean. The bathroom featured a shower big enough for 4 people, and a soaking tub positioned to take advantage of the view. It was, objectively, the most beautiful room I'd ever been in. "I'll be right down the hall," Dante said, lingering in the doorway. "If you need anything at all, just call. The intercom system is voice-activated. Just say my name." I nodded, suddenly aware of how alone we were. No party guests, no security team hovering nearby, no immediate threat forcing us together. Just Dante and me in this beautiful, isolated place, with nothing between us but air and possibility, and the weight of everything that had happened. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "For all of this. For protecting me. For not thinking I'm crazy. For—" I gestured helplessly at the room, at the island, at everything. "For caring." Something shifted in his expression, went soft and dangerous all at once. He crossed the threshold in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was there, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His hand came up to cup my face, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "Get some rest," he murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "Tomorrow we'll deal with everything. The DNA test, the security protocols, the politics. Tonight, just sleep. Be safe." He kissed my forehead, gentle and chaste, then left before I could respond. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there for a long moment, my skin still tingling where he'd touched me, my heart doing complicated things in my chest. I should have been terrified. Should have been planning my escape, questioning everything, refusing to trust this beautiful stranger who'd inserted himself into my life with devastating efficiency. But as I showered in that magnificent bathroom and slipped between those impossibly soft sheets, all I felt was a strange sense of rightness, as if I'd finally found something I hadn't known I was looking for. Sleep claimed me quickly, dragging me down into dreams of fire and water and a man's dark eyes that saw straight through to my soul. I woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains and the smell of coffee and something baking. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was back in my apartment, that the previous night had been some fever dream brought on by too much stress and not enough sleep. Then I saw the ocean through the French doors, remembered where I was, and reality came crashing back with brutal clarity. I found clothes laid out in the bathroom, linen pants and a soft cotton shirt, both in my size, both clearly expensive. I was beginning to suspect Dante had an entire wardrobe prepared for me, which should have been creepy, but instead felt oddly thoughtful, like he'd been preparing for my arrival long before that satin robe fell into his pool. The thought made me shiver with something that wasn't quite fear. I followed the smell of coffee down the floating staircase to find Dante in the kitchen, cooking breakfast with the easy competence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. He wore linen pants and a white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal those scarred forearms I'd noticed last night. His feet were bare. His hair was damp, as if he'd recently showered. He looked domestic and dangerous in equal measure, and my traitorous heart skipped at the sight of him. "Good morning," he said, glancing up with a smile. "I hope you like frittatas. I made one with local vegetables from the island's greenhouse." "You have a greenhouse?" "Solar-powered, climate-controlled. Produces enough food to keep the island self-sufficient for months if necessary." He slid a perfectly golden frittata onto a plate and handed it to me. "Coffee's fresh. Help yourself." I poured coffee from a French press. Of course it was a French press. Of course the coffee was probably single origin and ethically sourced and roasted by artisans who'd devoted their lives to the craft, and took a seat at the kitchen island. The frittata was predictably perfect. Eggs that tasted like eggs were supposed to taste, vegetables that burst with flavor, cheese that melted on my tongue in a way that made me want to weep. "This is incredible," I said around a mouthful. "Did you learn to cook in Mafia school?" Dante laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "My grandmother taught me. She insisted all her grandchildren know how to feed themselves properly. Said depending on others for basic survival was a weakness. Smart woman. The smartest." His expression went soft, nostalgic. "She ran the family for 40 years after my grandfather died. Ruled South Florida with an iron fist wrapped in homemade pasta and strategic marriage alliances." I set down my fork, suddenly not hungry. "Your family, the Ferraros. Where do you fit in all of this? What's your connection to the Santoros beyond knowing my father?" Dante poured himself coffee and settled onto the stool beside me, close enough that our knees touched. "The Ferraros control most of the legitimate business interests in South Florida. Real estate, hospitality, import-export through legal channels. We're the acceptable face of the organization, the ones who go to charity galas and sit on corporate boards and pretend we don't know where half our money comes from." "But you do know." "I've known since I was 12, and my father sat me down and explained exactly what our family business entailed." His jaw tightened. "I've spent the last 15 years trying to legitimize as much as possible, move us away from the violent side of things. It's why Antonio and I became allies. We both wanted something better for the next generation." "Did you succeed?" "Partially." He stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers. "The younger generation is less involved in the traditional activities. We've divested from several problematic businesses, invested heavily in legitimate ventures. But completely cutting ties with the old ways?" He shook his head. "It's complicated. There are obligations, debts, connections that go back generations. You can't just walk away. Can or won't." His eyes met mine, dark and honest. Both. This life, it's in my blood. I've tried to use my position for good, to minimize harm, to protect people who can't protect themselves. But I'm not innocent, Maya. I've made decisions that kept me up at night, done things I'm not proud of. If you're looking for a hero, you're going to be disappointed. The honesty was jarring, refreshing. I'm not looking for a hero. I'm trying to figure out if I can trust you. That's fair. He set down his coffee and turned to face me fully, his knee pressing more firmly against mine. Here's what I can promise you. While you're under my protection, no harm will come to you. Not from Marco, not from anyone. I'll help you discover the truth about your identity, and whatever that truth is, I'll support whatever decision you make about your future. And if you want to walk away from all of this, the inheritance, the family, everything, I'll make sure you can do that safely. And if I don't walk away? Something heated flickered in his eyes. Then I'll stand beside you, help you claim what's yours, teach you how to survive in this world, whatever you need. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. Dante reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered, tracing the shell of my ear in a way that made me shiver. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want something from me, he said quietly. Power, money, connections, protection. They see Dante Ferraro, head of the Ferraro organization, and they calculate how I can be useful to them. His thumb traced my jawline. But when you looked at me last night, in that cabana before everything went to hell, you saw just a man. You didn't know who I was, what I could do for you, and you were still interested. I was working, I protested weakly. You were curious. His smile was knowing, almost cocky. I saw it in your eyes, the same pull I felt, like recognizing something in someone you didn't know you were looking for. My breath caught. He was right, of course. I had felt it, that magnetic pull, that sense of recognition that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with some primal part of my brain that had looked at Dante Ferraro and said mine. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. Alessandro, the DNA results are ready. Everything else fell away. The intimate moment, the charged atmosphere, the breakfast cooling on our plates. All of it vanished in the face of that simple statement. The DNA results were ready. In the next few minutes, I would know for certain whether I was Maya Reed, freelance graphic designer, or Gabriella Santoro, heir to a criminal empire. I don't know if I'm ready for this, I whispered. You don't have to be. Dante's hand found mine, his fingers interlacing with my trembling ones. Whatever the results say, whatever you decide to do with that information, I'm here. You're not facing this alone. He led me to a study similar to the one in his Miami mansion. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, expensive art on the walls, technology that probably cost more than most people's houses. A large monitor dominated one wall, and Dante tapped it to life with a voice command. Alessandro's face appeared on screen, his expression grave. Behind him, I could see what looked like a medical laboratory, all stainless steel and sophisticated equipment. Good morning, Alessandro said formally. Ms. Reed, Dante. I have the preliminary results from the DNA analysis. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Dante's hand tightened around mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. And? Dante prompted when Alessandro hesitated. The mitochondrial DNA is a match, Alessandro said carefully. Maya Reed shares maternal lineage with the Santoro family. The probability that she is Gabriella Santoro, daughter of Antonio and Maria Santoro, is 97%. The room tilted. I heard someone make a sound, a gasp, a sob, something broken and shocked. and realized it was me. Dante's arm came around my waist, supporting me as my legs turned to water. "You're certain?" Dante asked, his voice sharp. "As certain as modern science allows." Alessandro's expression was sympathetic. "I've sent the full report to your secure server. But there's no doubt. Maya is Gabriella." I was Gabriella Santoro, the daughter who'd been presumed dead for 23 years. The heir to an empire I'd never wanted. The girl who'd been saved from a fire and hidden away, given a chance at a normal life that was now irrevocably shattered. "Maya." Dante's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Breathe. Just breathe." I tried, failed, tried again. Managed a shallow gasp that brought oxygen but no relief from the crushing weight on my chest. "There's more," Alessandro said grimly. "Marco Santoro has issued a formal challenge. He's claiming Maya is an imposter, demanding she present herself before the Council of Families to prove her identity publicly. It's a trap, obviously. The moment she surfaces, he'll kill her." "Then she doesn't surface," Dante replied, his voice cold and hard. "We have the DNA proof. We don't need the Council's approval." "Actually, we do." Alessandro's expression was apologetic. "According to the terms of Antonio's will, the heir must be verified by the Council before taking possession of the estate. It's an old tradition, meant to prevent fraudulent claims. If Maya refuses to appear, Marco can argue she's hiding because she knows she's not really Gabriella." "That's insane," I managed, finding my voice at last. "He's the one who sent assassins after me. Why would I willingly walk into his trap?" "Because," Alessandro said quietly, "it's the only way to claim what's legally yours. And because if you don't appear, Marco will consolidate power quickly. Within a month, he'll control everything Antonio built. The Council won't oppose him if the rightful heir refuses to step forward." I pulled away from Dante, needing space to think, to process. I walked to the windows and stared out at the ocean, at the deceptively peaceful waves rolling toward the shore. Somewhere out there, beyond this beautiful island prison, was my old life. My apartment with the broken air conditioning, my freelance clients who needed logo redesigns, my parents who thought I was working on a secret project. All of it felt like a dream I'd had once, a story about someone else. "I need time," I said, not turning around. "Time to think about what I want to do." "Of course," Dante said. "Alessandro, keep monitoring the situation. Let us know if anything changes." "There's one more thing." Alessandro's voice carried a strange note, something that might have been hope or fear. Marco's challenge specified a meeting location, the Santoro family compound in Coral Gables, the same place where Gabriella disappeared 23 years ago. The weight of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Marco wanted me to return to the place where I'd almost died, where my real parents had lost their daughter, where this entire nightmare had begun. "Absolutely not," Dante said flatly. "It's too dangerous." But I was already turning around, an idea forming. What if that's exactly where we need to go? Both men stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Think about it," I continued, the pieces falling into place. "Marco's expecting me to hide, to refuse the challenge. That's what gives him power, my fear, my absence. But what if I call his bluff? Show up at the compound with enough protection that he can't touch me, prove my identity publicly, and force the Council to acknowledge me as Antonio's heir?" "You'd be walking into a war zone," Dante said, his expression grim. "Even with security, the risk is worth it if it ends this." I moved back toward him, drawn by the magnetic pull that seemed to exist between us regardless of circumstance. "I didn't ask for this inheritance. I don't want to be Gabriella Santoro. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hiding either, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for Marco to find me." If I'm going to survive this, I need to face it head on. Dante studied me for a long moment, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The desire to protect me warring with respect for my autonomy. His strategic mind calculating odds against his emotional investment in keeping me safe. If we do this, he said finally, we do it my way. Full security detail, allied families as witnesses, every contingency planned for. You don't take a single step without protection. Agreed. I nodded, relief and terror warring in my chest. Agreed. Alessandro was already typing rapidly on his keyboard. I'll coordinate with the other families, arrange for neutral ground rules. The council meeting can't happen immediately. It'll take at least a week to gather everyone and secure the compound properly. A week, I repeated. 7 days to prepare myself mentally for walking into the lion's den. 7 days on this island with Dante, learning who I really was, deciding who I wanted to become. 7 days before I faced my cousin who wanted me dead and claimed the inheritance that would either save me or destroy everything. We'll use the time wisely, Dante said, dismissing Alessandro with a nod. The screen went dark, leaving us alone in the study. I'll teach you everything you need to know about the Santoro organization, the key players, the business interests, the alliances and rivalries. You'll walk into that council meeting prepared. And after? I asked quietly. After I'm officially Gabriella Santoro, heir to the Empire. What happens then? Dante stepped closer, his hands settling on my hips, pulling me against him. Then you decide what kind of leader you want to be. Whether you want to continue your father's work or dismantle it entirely. Whether you want to embrace this life or find a way to escape it. His forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my lips. And you decide whether there's room in any of those futures for a man like me. Dante. He kissed me, swallowing whatever I'd been about to say. This kiss was different from the one in the panic room. Deeper, more desperate, carrying the weight of everything unsaid between us. His hands moved from my hips to my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between our bodies. I melted into him, let him take my weight, let myself stop thinking about assassins and inheritances and impossible choices. For just this moment, I let myself be Maya, and I let myself want Dante Ferraro with an intensity that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. 1 week, he murmured. 1 week to figure out if this thing between us is real or just adrenaline and proximity. And if it's real? I asked, my hands fisted in his shirt. His smile was slow, dangerous, full of promise. Then we figure out how to make it work. Together. The week passed in a blur of intense preparation and stolen moments of normalcy that felt precious precisely because they were doomed to end. Mornings were devoted to education. Dante transformed the study into a war room, covering the walls with organizational charts, financial statements, and photographs of key players in the South Florida criminal landscape. He taught me about the Santoro Empire with the patience of a professor and the strategic insight of someone who'd spent his life navigating these dangerous waters. Your father controlled 3 primary revenue streams, Dante explained on the second day, pointing to a complex flowchart. Legitimate import-export through the port of Miami, completely legal, very profitable. Semi-legitimate real estate holdings, properties purchased with questionable funds but currently operating above board. And then there's the traditional business. You mean the illegal stuff, I said, taking notes on my laptop. Protection services, gambling operations, certain pharmaceutical distributions. His expression was carefully neutral. Your father was moving away from the more violent aspects, trying to transition into legitimacy like my family has. But these things take time. You can't just abandon networks that have existed for decades without creating power vacuums. I studied the charts, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of it. How much is it all worth? Antonio's personal wealth was estimated at $340 million. The organization's total assets, including properties, businesses, and liquid capital. Dante pulled up another file. North of $1 billion. The number was so large it stopped having meaning. I'd worried about making rent 2 weeks ago. Now I was potentially inheriting wealth that could buy small countries. Marco's been consolidating fast, Dante continued, switching to a timeline. Within a week of Antonio's death, he'd moved to take control of the protection networks. 2 weeks in, he'd absorbed the gambling operations. He's smart, methodical. If we'd waited another month, he would have been untouchable. But we didn't wait. I stood and moved to the window, needing distance from the overwhelming data. Because I accidentally texted you a picture of my ultrasound. I heard him move behind me, felt the warmth of his body as he stopped just close enough to make my skin tingle. Fate works in mysterious ways. Do you believe in fate? I asked, not turning around. I believe in preparation, strategy, and playing the odds. His hand came to rest on my shoulder, a gentle weight. But I'm starting to think there might be something to the universe pushing people together who need each other. I did turn then, finding him closer than expected. In the week we'd spent together, I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in his expression, the way his jaw tightened when he was worried, the slight softening around his eyes when he looked at me, the dangerous stillness that came over him when Alessandro called with updates about Marco's movements. Do you think we need each other? I asked quietly. I think, he said, his hand sliding from my shoulder to cup my face, that you've challenged every assumption I had about what I wanted from life. I think you're brilliant and brave, and you make me laugh even when we're discussing ways you might be assassinated. I think... His thumb traced my lower lip. I think I'm falling for you, Maya, and that terrifies me more than Marco's entire organization. My breath caught. We'd been dancing around it all week, the growing intensity between us, the way we'd gravitated toward each other at every opportunity, the increasingly heated kisses that left us both shaking and wanting more. But neither of us had put words to it until now. I'm falling for you too, I admitted, which is insane. We've known each other for a week. You're literally teaching me how to run a criminal empire. This is the least romantic situation imaginable. His laugh was soft, genuine. Then we'll have to work on that. That afternoon he did. After hours of studying financial reports and memorizing names of allied families, Dante declared we were taking a break. He led me down to the beach, where a picnic had been set up beneath a white canvas tent. Fresh fruit, local cheese, wine that probably cost more than my car. This is your doing, I accused, settling onto the blankets with a smile. I have many skills, he replied, uncorking the wine with practiced ease. Romancing beautiful women on private beaches is among them. How many beautiful women have you romanced on this particular beach? None. His expression turned serious. I don't bring people here, Maya. This island is my sanctuary, the one place I can be just Dante. Not the head of an organization or my father's son or any of the other roles I play. I've never shared it with anyone. The weight of that admission settled over me. Why me? Because you're the first person I've met who makes me want to share it. He poured wine into 2 glasses, handed me one. The first person who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't want something in return. I took a sip of wine to cover the emotion tightening my throat. That's not entirely true. I want you to keep me alive long enough to claim my inheritance. Fair enough. His smile was warm, teasing. But you wanted me before you knew I could protect you. I remember that look in your eyes by the cabana, before everything went to hell. Pure attraction. Nothing calculated about it. Heat crept up my neck. You're very confident. I'm very observant. He set down his wine and moved closer, his hand finding mine. And I observed the way your breath changed when I touched you. The way you leaned into me even when you were trying to maintain professional distance. The way you kissed me back like you'd been thinking about it for hours. Dante. His name was half protest, half invitation. He kissed me, slow and deep, tasting of wine and salt air and promises I desperately wanted to believe in. His hands tangled in my hair, angling my head for better access, and I melted into him with a surrender that should have terrified me, but instead felt like coming home. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "Stay with me tonight," Dante murmured against my neck, his lips tracing a path that made me shiver. Not because of danger or obligation, just because you want to. I should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, reminded myself that we were still essentially strangers thrown together by circumstance, that getting emotionally involved with Dante Ferraro was a complication I didn't need. But I was tired of should. Tired of being careful, of playing it safe, of denying what I wanted, because it didn't fit the life I'd carefully constructed. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." That night, I learned what it meant to be cherished. Dante made love to me with a reverence that brought tears to my eyes, his hands and mouth mapping every inch of my skin like he was memorizing me. He whispered to me in Italian, beautiful, incomprehensible things that sounded like poetry and promises. And afterward, as we lay tangled in his enormous bed with the ocean visible through the windows, he held me like I was something precious he'd found and refused to let go. "Tell me about your childhood," I said, my head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. "Which version?" His fingers traced lazy patterns on my shoulder. "The official story or the truth?" "Both." He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Official story. I was born into a wealthy family, attended the best schools, inherited my father's business empire at 25 when he died of a heart attack. Shrewd businessman, generous philanthropist, pillar of the Miami community. And the truth? I was born into the Mafia. My father ran protection rackets and gambling operations. He died of a bullet to the head during a territorial dispute, not a heart attack. I inherited his position along with his enemies, his debts, and his bloody legacy." His voice was matter of fact, but I felt the tension in his body. "I was 25 and terrified I'd be dead before I was 30. I pressed a kiss to his chest, directly over his heart. "But you weren't." "I got smart, made alliances instead of enemies, invested in legitimate businesses, learned that power doesn't always have to come from a gun." He tilted my face up to his. "And I waited for someone to give me a reason to want a future instead of just surviving the present." "Dante, I know it's fast," he interrupted softly. "I know we're still figuring this out. But Maya, you make me want things I thought I'd given up on. Family, partnership, a life that's about more than just the organization." My heart twisted. What if I can't do this? What if I claim the inheritance and realize I'm not cut out for this world? What if I fail? Then we figure it out together. His arms tightened around me. "But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to walk into that council meeting and show them exactly who Gabriella Santoro is. And I think they're going to be scared of you, which is exactly how it should be." The next few days passed in a similar rhythm. Mornings devoted to preparation, afternoons to stolen moments of normalcy, nights to discovering each other with an intensity that felt both urgent and inevitable. Dante taught me more than just organizational charts and alliance structures. He taught me how to read people, how to project confidence even when terrified, how to use silence as a weapon. "Never let them see you uncertain," he said during one lesson. "The moment you hesitate, they'll pounce. These people are predators. They respect strength, confidence, and the willingness to make hard decisions. Even if those decisions keep me up at night? Especially then. His expression was grim. The people who sleep soundly after ordering violence are the ones you need to worry about. The fact that it bothers you means you still have a conscience. That's valuable. On the 6th day, Alessandro called with news. The council meeting is confirmed for tomorrow evening. All major families have agreed to attend. Marco has accepted the terms of engagement. Neutral ground, no weapons beyond personal security, binding arbitration of the council's decision. He's going to try something, Dante said flatly. Marco doesn't agree to terms that disadvantage him. Agreed. Alessandro's face was grave on the screen. I've tripled security for the compound and arranged for medical personnel on standby. But Dante, if this goes wrong, it won't. Dante's voice was steel. Maya will be protected, whatever it takes. That night, after Alessandro signed off and the reality of tomorrow's confrontation settled over us like a shroud, I found Dante on the beach, staring out at the dark ocean. Having second thoughts? I asked, settling beside him on the sand. About protecting you? Never. He pulled me against his side, his arm warm around my shoulders. About letting you walk into danger when I have the power to prevent it, constantly. You can't protect me from this. It's who I am now. I turned to face him. Gabriella Santoro, heir to an empire I never asked for but can't walk away from. Not anymore. Why not? He challenged. You could still disappear. We have the resources to make you vanish so completely Marco would never find you. You could go back to being Maya Reed, or become someone new entirely. Have the quiet life you wanted. Except I'd always be running. I took his hand, intertwining our fingers, always looking over my shoulder, wondering when Marco would find me. And maybe more importantly, I paused, gathering courage. I'd be walking away from you. And I'm not ready to do that. Something fierce and tender crossed his face. Maya, I love you, I interrupted, needing to say it before I lost my nerve. I know it's insane. I know we've only known each other a week. But I love you, Dante Ferraro, and I'm not running from that either. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, pulling me into his lap so I was straddling him on the sand. I love you, he said between kisses. I love you, and tomorrow I'm going to make sure everyone in that room knows you're under my protection. That harming you means war with the Ferraro organization. That you're mine. Possessive, I murmured, but I was smiling. Completely. His hands slid under my shirt, warm against my skin. And when this is over, when you've claimed what's yours and Marco is dealt with, I'm going to marry you. Make you mine in every way that matters. My breath caught. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. His eyes burned into mine. A warning. I'm not letting you go, Maya. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide about the inheritance, we're doing this together. Understand? I understand. I kissed him softly. I understand that you're insane and possessive and probably the worst possible choice for a woman trying to enter the criminal underworld with some semblance of credibility. Probably, he agreed. And I understand that I don't care. I pulled back to look at him properly, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd crashed into my life and refused to leave. I want you, Dante, all of you. The good parts and the bloody parts and everything in between. We made love on the beach that night, under the stars, with the ocean as our soundtrack and the sand as our bed. It was desperate and tender and perfect, a claiming that went both ways. Later, as we lay wrapped in each other, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. That tomorrow I could walk into that council meeting and emerge victorious. That I could claim my inheritance, neutralize Marco's threat, and build something new with Dante by my side. I let myself believe in happily ever after, even though I knew better. Even though I knew that in the world Dante and I inhabited, happy endings had to be fought for, bled for, earned through sacrifice and strategic brilliance, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Tomorrow, I would fight for mine. Tomorrow, Gabriella Santoro would face her destiny, and God help anyone who tried to stop her. The Santoro compound in Coral Gables was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured something dark and foreboding, all iron gates and security cameras, a fortress designed to keep the world at bay. Instead, I found myself approaching a sprawling Mediterranean estate that could have been featured in architectural magazines. Pale stucco walls glowed in the early evening light. Bougainvillea cascaded over archways in explosions of purple and pink. Fountains tinkled cheerfully in courtyards, visible through wrought iron gates that managed to be both beautiful and impenetrable. "Your father had taste," Dante murmured beside me in the back of the armored SUV. We were traveling in a convoy, 3 vehicles filled with security personnel, all of them armed, all of them prepared for the possibility that tonight would end in violence. I couldn't respond. My throat was too tight with emotion I couldn't name. This place, this beautiful, terrible place, was where I'd been born, where I'd spent the first 13 years of my life before everything had burned, where my real parents had walked and laughed and loved me in ways I couldn't remember. The sense of recognition that washed over me as we passed through the gates was almost physical, like my body remembered even if my mind didn't. "You okay?" Dante's hand found mine, squeezed gently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The SUV stopped in a circular driveway where other vehicles were already parked, expensive sedans and SUVs that spoke of wealth and power. Through the window, I could see people gathering in what appeared to be a formal garden, all of them dressed in dark, expensive clothing that made them look like they were attending a very chic funeral, which, I supposed, they might be. Mine. "Remember what we discussed," Dante said, his voice low and urgent. "You don't speak unless spoken to directly. You don't admit to anything beyond your identity. And if anything feels wrong, you say the code word, and we get you out immediately." "Lighthouse," I confirmed, the random word we'd chosen specifically because it would never come up naturally in conversation. Alessandro appeared at the window, his expression grim. "The council is assembled. All 5 families are represented. Marco is here with his security detail, larger than the rules specified but within acceptable parameters." "Acceptable," Dante repeated flatly. "For now." Alessandro's gaze shifted to me. "Ms. Santoro, are you ready?" Ms. Santoro. Not Maya anymore. The name felt strange on my tongue, like wearing someone else's clothes. As ready as I'll ever be. Dante helped me from the vehicle, his hand at the small of my back as we moved toward the garden. I'd dressed carefully for this moment, in a black sheath dress that Dante had selected. Elegant, but not flashy. Expensive, but understated. The kind of thing that said, "I belong here," without screaming for attention. My hair was pulled back severely, and I wore minimal jewelry except for a pair of diamond studs that had belonged to my grandmother. The real one, Maria Santoro, whose DNA now proved ran through my veins. The garden opened before us like something from a dream. String lights twinkled overhead. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air. And arranged in a rough semicircle, seated in what looked like throne-like chairs, were the heads of the 5 families that controlled South Florida's criminal underworld. I recognized them from Dante's lessons. Don Vitale Rossi, elderly and sharp-eyed, his hands gnarled with age but his gaze missing nothing. Elena Martinez, the only woman among the council, who'd inherited her husband's organization and expanded it ruthlessly. Chen Wei, whose import business provided cover for operations spanning the Pacific Rim. Samuel Okonkwo, who controlled the port unions and could shut down shipping with a phone call. And Marco Santoro, my cousin, who sat in the center chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd already won. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of polished good looks that came from expensive grooming and careful genetics. Dark hair, dark eyes that tracked my approach with predatory interest. He wore a 3-piece suit that probably cost as much as a small car, and he smiled at me like we were old friends meeting for drinks rather than enemies preparing for war. "Gentlemen, Elena." Marco stood, spreading his arms in welcome. "And the guest of honor arrives at last, my long-lost cousin, back from the dead." The sarcasm in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. He didn't believe I was Gabriella. Or perhaps he simply didn't want to believe it. "Marco." Dante's voice was ice cold. "The council agreed to a formal presentation, not a family reunion. Let's proceed according to protocol." Don Vitale cleared his throat, and the conversations that had been murmuring through the garden ceased immediately. The old man commanded respect through simple presence, decades of power radiating from him like heat from a forge. "We are gathered," he began, his voice carrying despite its age, "to determine the validity of a claim made by this young woman. She asserts that she is Gabriella Santoro, daughter of Antonio and Maria, presumed dead these 23 years. Marco Santoro disputes this claim, suggesting she is an imposter seeking to steal his rightful inheritance. I don't dispute it," Marco interjected smoothly. "I welcome it, if true. But we must be certain. Too much is at stake to accept convenient DNA tests and emotional appeals." "The DNA test was conducted by an independent laboratory," Alessandro said, stepping forward with a tablet. "I have the results here, verified by 3 separate geneticists. The probability that Maya Reed is Gabriella Santoro is 97%. "DNA can be faked," Marco countered. "Samples can be contaminated. We need more than scientific evidence. We need proof that this woman is who she claims to be." "What kind of proof?" I asked, finding my voice at last. It came out stronger than I expected, carrying across the garden with surprising authority. Marco's smile widened. "Memories. Details about the family that only Gabriella would know. Our grandmother's favorite song. The name of our childhood dog. The location of the secret garden where Gabriella and I used to play. She was 13 when she disappeared," Dante said sharply. "After a traumatic event that could easily cause memory loss. You're asking for the impossible." "I'm asking," Marco said, his gaze never leaving mine, "for proof that she's my cousin, and not some opportunist with a conveniently placed tattoo." The assembled families murmured among themselves. I could feel the moment slipping away, could see the doubt creeping into their expressions. Marco was playing this perfectly, not denying outright, not appearing unreasonable, just raising enough questions to make them hesitate. "I don't remember," I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. "I don't remember my childhood here. I don't remember my parents or this house or anything before waking up in a hospital with smoke inhalation and no memory of how I got there. The adoption agency told my parents I'd been in an accident. They never knew about the fire, about the Santoros, about any of this." "Convenient," Marco murmured. "What I do remember," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "are flashes. Images that didn't make sense until I saw this place. A fountain with a stone dolphin. It's in the north courtyard, isn't it? I saw it when we drove in. I remember a room with walls the color of the ocean, and a window seat where I used to read. I remember..." My breath caught as the memory surfaced, vivid and painful. "I remember a woman singing to me, Italian lullabies. Her voice was beautiful, and she smelled like gardenias." Elena Martinez leaned forward, her expression intent. Maria Santoro wore gardenia perfume. It was her signature scent. Anyone could know that. Marco said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. The room you described, Don Vitale said slowly. Ocean blue walls, window seat. That was Gabriella's room. Antonio had it painted that specific shade because his daughter loved the sea. The old man's eyes were sharp on me. Where was the window seat positioned? Which direction did it face? I closed my eyes, letting the memory surface. East. It faced east, toward the sunrise. I used to wake up early and watch the light change, watch the sky turn from purple to pink to gold. Silence fell over the garden. Even Marco seemed at a loss for words. There's something else, I said, pulling the neckline of my dress aside to reveal my shoulder. I have a scar here, small, crescent-shaped. I always assumed it was from the accident that put me in the hospital. But it's not, is it? Elena stood and moved closer, examining the scar with clinical interest. When she looked up, her expression had softened. Gabriella fell from a tree when she was 9, split her shoulder on a branch on the way down. Antonio was furious with the gardener who'd left the climbing rope accessible. She turned to address the council. I was there when it happened. I remember the scar. This proves nothing, Marco insisted, but desperation had crept into his voice. Scars can be faked, memories implanted. You're all being manipulated. Enough. Don Vitale's voice cracked like a whip. We've heard sufficient evidence. The council will deliberate. The 5 family heads drew together in a tight cluster, their voices low and urgent. Dante moved closer to me, his presence a comfort as we waited for judgment. I could feel Marco's eyes on me, could sense the violence coiling beneath his polished exterior. Whatever happens, Dante murmured, we're leaving together. You're not staying in this house overnight, regardless of what they decide. What if they don't believe me? Then we fight. His hand found mine, squeezed hard. We take this public. Use the DNA evidence to challenge Marco's claim in court. It'll be messy, but the council has reached a decision. Don Vitale's voice silenced all side conversations. The old man stepped forward, his expression grave. We find the evidence compelling. The DNA, the memories, the physical proof all point to one conclusion. This woman is Gabriella Santoro, rightful heir to Antonio's estate. Relief crashed through me so intensely my knees nearly buckled. Dante's arm came around my waist, supporting me as the council members nodded their agreement. All except Marco. This is a mistake, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. You're all being played. This imposter is your cousin, Elena interrupted coldly. And under the terms of Antonio's will, she now controls the Santoro organization. You will step down and relinquish all authority immediately. Marco's laugh was bitter, edged with madness. You think I'll just walk away? Hand over everything I've built to this pretender? His hand moved toward his jacket, toward what I suddenly realized was a weapon concealed there. Everything happened at once. Dante shoved me behind him. Alessandro and the security team drew their weapons with practiced precision. The other family's guards moved to create a protective barrier. And Marco pulled a gun, his expression twisted with rage. If I can't have it, he snarled, then nobody can. The shot rang out before anyone could stop him. But Marco wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming at Don Vitale, at the head of the council whose decision had sealed Marco's fate. Except he never got the chance to fire a second time. 3 shots answered his, from Alessandro, from Dante's head of security, from Elena Martinez's bodyguard. Marco fell backward, the gun clattering from his hand, blood blooming across his expensive shirt in spreading roses of crimson. The garden erupted into chaos. People screaming, guards shouting, the council members being hustled toward safety. Dante turned me away, shielding me from the sight of my cousin dying on the same ground where I'd played as a child. "Don't look," he ordered, his hands on my face, forcing me to focus on him instead of the violence. "Look at me, Maya. Just me." But I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't process what had just happened. Marco was dead. My cousin, my enemy, the man who'd sent assassins after me, dead in the space of heartbeats. "We need to leave," Alessandro said urgently. "Now, before anyone starts asking questions." Dante nodded and swept me into his arms, carrying me toward the SUV like I weighed nothing. I buried my face in his neck, letting him shield me from the chaos, from the blood, from the terrible reality of what my life had become. We were pulling away from the compound when I finally found my voice. Did I just inherit a criminal empire by default? Because my cousin tried to assassinate a council member and got himself killed? "Technically," Alessandro said from the front seat, "you inherited it the moment the council acknowledged your identity. Marco's death just simplified things." I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of the entire situation, from accidentally texting a Mafia boss to inheriting hundreds of millions because my homicidal cousin had terrible aim. It was too much. The laughter turned to tears, and Dante held me through both, his arms a fortress around my shaking body. "Take us to the island," Dante ordered Luca, "and make sure we're not followed." "What happens now?" I asked, once I'd regained some composure. "With Marco dead and me in control?" "Now," Dante said carefully, "you have choices to make, real ones, without a gun to your head or assassins chasing you. You can maintain the organization as it is, run it the way your father did. You can dismantle it, sell off the assets, walk away. Or you can try to do what Antonio wanted, transition everything into legitimacy, use the power and resources for something better." I thought about that as we drove through the Miami night. Thought about my father, who'd wanted better for his daughter. About my mother, who'd died never knowing her child survived. About the life I could have had versus the life I'd actually lived. "I want to try," I said finally. "Not to run away or pretend none of this is real, but to actually try to make something good out of it. Use the resources to help people, to clean up the worst of what the organization does. Is that naive?" "Probably," Dante admitted, "but I'll help you try anyway." "Why?" I turned to look at him in the dim light of the SUV. "Why commit yourself to this insanity? You could walk away right now, go back to your own empire, let me figure this out on my own." His smile was soft, devastating. "Because I love you. Because I meant what I said on the beach. I'm not letting you go. Because..." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my heart stopped. "Because I want to spend the rest of my life helping you change the world. One reformed criminal enterprise at a time." He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple band of platinum with a single flawless diamond, elegant and understated and absolutely perfect. "Dante," I breathed. "Marry me," he said simply. Not because of the alliance it would create or the strategic advantage. Marry me because in a week you've become the most important thing in my world. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. Because I love you, Maya Gabriella, whoever you decide to be. Marry me." "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face again. "Yes, you insane, possessive, wonderful man. Yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Dante probably knew my ring size before I did. Had probably been planning this since the moment he pulled me from his pool and saw the tattoo that changed everything. We spent that night on the island, wrapped in each other, planning a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. In the morning, I would return to the Santoro compound, my compound now, and begin the work of transforming my father's legacy. I would meet with lawyers and accountants and the various people who'd answered to Marco. I would make hard decisions and face opposition, and probably make 1,000 mistakes along the way. But I wouldn't be alone. Dante would be beside me. Alessandro would provide guidance. The council, having accepted my claim, would offer support even if they didn't entirely trust my plans for reform. And somewhere, I like to think, Antonio and Maria Santoro were watching their daughter come home at last. Not the home of my childhood, perhaps, but home to herself, home to her truth, home to the family she'd chosen, rather than the one she'd lost. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay tangled in his bed. "That my satin robe falling into your pool was the best accident that ever happened to me," I said, smiling at the memory. "Even though it nearly got me killed multiple times." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Remind me to send that robe a thank you note. It's at the bottom of your pool, then I'll have it framed. A monument to the night my entire world changed." I rolled over to face him, taking in every detail of this man who'd crashed into my life and refused to leave. The scar on his jaw, the silver in his dark hair, the eyes that had seen too much violence but still looked at me with tenderness. "I love you," I said simply. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," he corrected, pulling me close. "I just provided the helicopter and the private island and the extensive security detail." "Details," I murmured against his chest. "Important details." His arms tightened around me. "I'm very good at details. It's why I'm going to make an excellent husband. Confident, aren't you?" "Completely." He pressed a kiss to my hair. "After all, I'm marrying Gabriella Santoro, heir to a billion-dollar empire, the woman who walked into a council meeting and claimed her birthright with nothing but DNA evidence and a handful of childhood memories. If I can win her, I can do anything." I fell asleep, smiling, wrapped in the arms of the man I loved, dreaming of the future we'd build together. It wouldn't be easy. Reforming a criminal organization never was. There would be resistance, setbacks, people who'd test my authority and question my decisions. There would be moments when I'd doubt myself, when I'd wonder if I was strong enough, smart enough, ruthless enough to survive in this world. But I had Dante. I had my father's legacy. I had the truth of who I was. And I had a satin robe at the bottom of a pool to remind me that sometimes the most important moments of our lives begin with simple accidents. Sometimes we fall in exactly the right direction.